everybody. Welcome to Friday night. It's so good you made it through the week, and it's great that you're here, and I'm really glad you are, because, man, was there a lot of news today in the true crime world. Some of it I didn't see coming. I did not see the Los Angeles DA about to come out and throw cold water on everything we've all been thinking is going to happen to the Menendez brothers, i.e., I think they might get out. That's not necessarily going to happen if Nathan Hawkman meant what he said today, and if he really has as much sway as we think he does. I have some interesting news about this, and I have the first response now from the Menendez brothers' lawyer, because that lawyer, Mark Geragos, was watching too, as Nathan Hawkman came before the microphones and did a big public announcement about what he thinks about one pathway to freedom for these guys. I got all of that for you in a minute. Actually, why don't you take a really quick look? I'm just going to give you a soup song of what the DA said. Take a peek.
We conclude in our informal response that the court should deny the current habeas petition by the Menendez brothers.
So what does that mean? And does it mean much? This is really interesting, the politics and the strategies that are coming down now in this case. And then on the other coast, I'm taking you from L.A. all the way to New York City, because that's where one very handsome and debonair and beloved murder suspect / defendant made yet another appearance in court today. This was Luigi Mangione wearing his fabulous forest green sweater and white Oxford shirt with a bulletproof vest as an accent. I mean, you know what I'm going to tell you, right? You know what I'm going to tell you was going on outside the courthouse. Luigi, we love you. It was wild. Look at this. Lock up the criminals. Free Luigi. I guess this means they don't think he's a criminal. And we can't say he is either. He hasn't had his full day in court, but he is an accused first-degree murderer who could face the death penalty for an execution on the streets of New York. Let's not forget that. It was a man with a family, kids. Lock up the criminals? Okay, so there was that going on, which is fascinating. And I'll tell you what his lawyer did, because she came down hard on the mayor of New York, and probably for good reason. I'll tell you why in a second. Then, look, I can't seem to shake the Jack the Ripper story. I did a whole hour on it last week on this day, Friday of last week. Everybody seems to have a theory, even though the British historian has come out with a DNA match to a bloody shawl that was found at the scene, right? Everybody has a theory. But there is one theory you absolutely have to hear, and it is Patricia Cornwell's, because that lady, she knows murder. One of the most prolific and successful murder writers of all time, I might add. She is on the show tonight with her theory, and it is a good one. She's going to tell you what she thinks about that DNA theory, too. All that is just ahead. Do not go anywhere, folks. It's going to be a wild Friday night. I have no idea. I really don't. I just don't know what's going to happen when Eric and Lyle Menendez go before the judge next month. Obviously, they are hoping for good news. Next month, it is a resentencing hearing for killing their parents. It's a resentencing. Prong number one. I do not have to tell you that their multi-pronged effort to get out of prison has been in flux ever since a brand new DA was elected in LA. But tonight, we know one thing we did not know last night, and it's a biggie. We know where that new DA, Nathan Hawkman, stands on the Menendez brothers' case. And it is not what the brothers wanted to hear. Just hours after Lyle and Eric did a wide-ranging, really probing interview with Harvey Levin of TMZ and their lawyer, Mark Geragos, for their podcast, Two Angry Men, the DA took to the microphone too. Maybe the DA was trying to bring the pendulum of public sentiment back towards the victims in the case. That's Eric and Lyle's murdered parents, you know, the ones who were shot in the face. But whatever the DA's motivation, he effectively said he does not believe in the new evidence presented in order for Eric and Lyle to get new trials. This is the second prong, the so-called habeas corpus petition. But make no mistake, my friends in the true crime community, you are very vested in this. I get it. Make no mistake, a judge could feel very differently than the DA does. And I am telling you, the last DA felt 100% differently. George Gascon, he supported the brothers' efforts before he was booted out of office. There are these other pathways that the brothers could take to secure their freedom. There is also the clemency from the governor. And like I said, the reduced sentence is a possibility too. That comes from a judge. Look, this week is absolutely brimming with news about these brothers because of what they revealed in that Blockbuster interview. They talked openly about the decisions that they made to make their lives better, even with no hope of ever setting foot outside of a prison. And they both chose that path independently from each other because they were locked up separately in separate prisons for 21 years. They're together now, but those 21 years were like from their 20s to their 40s. I mean, think about it. Put yourself in these shoes, right? You're a young 20-something, like really young, and you are told toe tag parole. You're not getting out until there's a toe tag on you in a box. What would you do? I would watch TV and eat. And I'd mark the days until I die. But would you go the route of self-improvement? Would you go the route of helping others just for the sake of doing good? Because you know it's not going to affect you. The appeals were gone. Everything was gone. They're stuck there for life. That is what the Menendezes did. That's what the boys did who became men. They advocated for other inmates. They destigmatized male sexual abuse, which is real and painful and horrifying, and they got crucified for it. They wanted to make sure no one else did. They created green spaces to try to work on rehabilitation and stop recidivism, people coming back. They started art classes. They started yoga classes. They got a degree. I mean, you get the idea here, right? All of this, even though, again, zero incentive to be good people. I'm going to play you what DA Nathan Hawkman said, what his take was on all of this, and that's coming in just a minute. But first, Eric Menendez, reflecting on Eric Menendez.
I look at teenagers now and I think if I were to see an 18-year-old come onto a prison yard now, I would think that that person's not safe. Like I don't look at that person and say, oh, you have all of your stuff together and you know what's going on and you have a good sense of self. So I think that my youth and deeply misguided, imprinted ideas of what success meant in life were reflected in your sentiment. And I'm not surprised that you felt that way. I look back and I'm so ashamed and embarrassed about even the little things that I did in life. And I'm not sure anyone looks back on their teenage years and is really fully proud of themselves. Maybe you are, Harvey. I'm sure Mark is. But
I'm sure Mark is too.
I'm not that person. But who I've evolved into, who I've seen Lyle evolve into, I'm beginning to like myself and be proud of myself and find it okay to like myself and not hate myself.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
What happened to me as a child. So I think that's an accurate sentiment, and I'm striving to be a good person, and I'm striving to be a better person every day, and I want to be a person that my family can be proud of, for certain. I want my daughter to be proud of me, and my wife to be proud of me, and my extended family to be proud of me, and my brother to be proud of me. And so that's who I am today.
Again, that's from Harvey Levin and Mark Geragos' podcast called Two Angry Men. As for DA Nathan Hawkman, he did not take a position on the resentencing. That issue is coming up in March. But he did say he has a problem with the brothers' credibility.
Eric and Lyle Menendez had told 5 different versions of the events of what had happened. The first version that they told is that they did not kill their parents. This was the version they told when they were first confronted, or they first made their 911 call. And they said that someone had murdered their parents, obviously not them. The second version was that their father was a violent sexual predator who raped Lyle's girlfriend. The third version that Lyle told was that their father had molested Eric, but the mother had molested Lyle, without any mention of Lyle being molested by his father. Again, that version ultimately didn't show up at trial in their defense. The fourth version is that Eric and Lyle were both molested by their father, And the fifth version is that both their father and their mother were going to kill them the night of August 20th, 1989, which is why they shot them first.
I'm joined now by Mark Geragos. He's the defense attorney for Lyle and Eric Menendez and a good friend of the show. So, Geragos, I know you've been busy in court all day, but this is the first chance I've had to actually talk to you since not only the podcast, but also what Hawkman's response was. I'm not sure it was a response because I think he says he didn't actually see or hear the podcast. I think he was just told about it. But what do you make of this?
Well, I jokingly say that Nathan Hawkman, who I've known of for many years, was elected because the 90s were calling and they wanted their DA's office back. And he did a splendid job of rehashing all of the 90s prosecutorial kind of platitudes. The fact remains that he gave basically the speech that Pam Bozanich gave to the jury, the first jury. What he left out was that there were two juries in that first trial, and both juries separately, one for Lyle, one for Eric, more than half voted not guilty on murder. So we've now trotted out this idea that somehow they're liars back then, and so therefore we shouldn't deal with the new evidence. But they weren't the only ones who were called liars, basically, because the habeas is based on two pieces of evidence. It's based on a letter that was written by Eric to his cousin Andy, and it's based on a declaration by a gentleman, as you mentioned, from Menudo named Roy Rosello. Well, he didn't really deal with, and the habeas doesn't deal with, Roy Rosello because they can't, because Roy Rosello, they said something that made no sense, the habeas said, because again, they didn't know about Roy, that couldn't go to their state of mind.
So our audience,
yeah.
I want to just make sure our audience knows Roy Rosello was the boy band member of Menudo who came forward and said, hey, Jose Menendez did this to me too. So he gave some credibility publicly to the argument that Jose Menendez was a child sex abuser. So I just want to make clear when you make comments about his name, that's who that guy is.
And right, and for those who don't know, Jose Menendez was an executive at a record company. Menudo was signed to that record company. For some reason, the habeas response that was filed, and Mr. Hawkman, who was parroting that, said, well, the boys didn't know about that then, so that couldn't have been the reason that they did the killings, and which is beside the point. The point is, no, here was a third party who has now identified Jose as the predator who raped them. And on top of it, this third party, Mr. Rosello, said it happened in their house. And why is that significant? Because he felt he was so safe in his house because Kitty was protecting him, protecting Jose, that he could take somebody who wasn't his son there. And remember, this is the same guy who there was credible testimony from other relatives that there was a hallway rule where you could not go down the hallway. Kitty was the enforcer if Jose was in the room with one of the boys. So that was nonsense. And then the letter was really infuriating because the letter was found more than 10 years after Andy Cano had died. It was in his effects, and it was found by a journalist in the house, mind you, of Jose's sister. And Jose's sister then talked to Kitty's sister, Joan, and said, look what I found. And Joan realized the significance and had Marta, Jose's sister, in blue pen initial the back of it. And guess what? I gave that copy with the blue pen initial in a declaration to the DA. They acknowledge that it was an original a year ago. Today they don't. They don't acknowledge also that Joan Vandermolen testified about this 14 months ago under oath and said, I recognized how important this was when we found it. And mind you, Lyle and Eric had been in custody for over 20 years. They had no hope at that point. They weren't trying to do an appeal. all of this was really kabuki theater today. The habeas that was filed today that I got 1 minute before the press conference is the almost virtually identical habeas that was going to be filed by the same group of disgruntled internal prosecutors that were back then in the DA's office or have survived since and are still there today, including one John Lewin, who just spectacularly lost this week, Aesop Rocky. So this DA's office is they're not only replicating the 90s in their attitude, they're replicating the 90s in starting to be that they can't win the cases.
We've got Aesop Rocky's lawyer, Joe Tacopina, coming up a little later on in this program, too. So thank you for teeing that up. I do want to ask you this.
By the way, when you have Joe on, ask Joe about his experience with the LA DA's office, because that's somebody who doesn't usually practice in LA. I would be fascinated to hear what he's got to say.
Let's stay with this case because I know you have a heart out, and I am so fascinated, as an outsider, I am fascinated by how one DA can interpret this evidence, Rosselli's evidence, the letter, completely different than another DA, which makes me feel like it's all political. It's not really Lady Justice is blind. And I'm not accusing either DA either way. What I want to know is how influential is Nathan Hawkman as the DA on the habeas case, on the resentencing case, on Governor Newsom and the clemency case?
Who knows? I mean, that's above my pay grade. This is what I will tell you. Everything that was said today, there is a cogent, simple, and actual fact that rebuts it. I mean, it was unfortunate. I don't even understand what the purpose of today was. This wasn't due until the 20th. They've requested, I think, 12, maybe 14 continuances of this, and they decided that they're going to drop this opposition now and they're going to do this dog and pony show. You tell me, most people, I had predicted this morning, by the way, that this is exactly what would happen. And like I said, I feel for Nathan Hawkman. He's sitting there trying to placate a disgruntled group of prosecutors internally, and he realizes that if you asked him honestly, where he wasn't having to placate this group, have you ever seen in your history in the criminal justice system, have you ever seen two people who have performed in a more exemplary fashion for 30 years in the prison? And by the way, isn't that what we want out of people that we sentence to life without parole? Because talk to some correctional officer, ask the correctional officer which kind of an inmate they would rather go to work and supervise each day. Somebody who made the turn towards I don't give a hoot, and I don't, frankly, Ashleigh, I don't think they'd be sitting and eating like you. I think they'd be doing some other kinds of things. Or somebody like this who invented a hospice program, like Eric talked about, that was meaningful to him. People who were doing the Guide Dogs of America program there, who hadn't touched a dog in God knows how long, and they're training service dogs. Or Lyle's Green Space Initiative, where he's worried about and is trying to create and import the Norwegian model so that when you do release prisoners back out into the community, they don't come back.
They don't come back.
It's not a revolving door.
Yeah.
You reduce, they don't come back. Because, by the way,
I think you're right.
90% of these people are going to be released.
I will give you that. I'll give you two things. First of all, if anyone just joined us partway in, it was me who said I would go into prison and just eat and get fat until my days were over. It's not Geragos who accused me of that. And I haven't seen prisoners behave as an exemplary, in as an exemplary fashion as they have. You're absolutely right. But I also understand the other side implicitly, and that is that two boys planned the murder of their parents, and it was so egregious.
Yeah,
that's the other side, that they shot their parents and went back and unloaded bullets in the head.
I understand, but Ashleigh, who is, under our Constitution, who's got the right to voice that? It's the victims. The victims, except for Uncle Milton, who's got his own issues. Over 20 of them are vehemently, vigorously advocating for their release. And by the way, they don't want to go through a parole hearing. They don't want to have to go through one for Eric, one for Lyle. They don't want to go through this for the family. They want to heal. They're the victims. Why is it? What interest is being vindicated by placating a bunch of disgruntled prosecutors in the LADA's office? What interest? I thought that they were there to vindicate the interests of the victims, and the victim's family is almost uniformly saying, let them out.
I know.
Especially
it's a bizarre
Kitty's
case.
Sister and Jose's sister.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah, it is
I'm
a
with you
bizarre
on all
case
of it.
because
It is a
politics
bizarre
is
case.
infected.
You never ever see very rarely see victims backing the murderers. You rarely see that. So this is that's why it's fascinating. It's why you're a great advocate for them, and it's why you're very good on TV when I try to go head to head with you and always lose.
Well, I don't think it's a matter of being an advocate. I think it's somebody, just tell the truth. Just stop with the nonsense. Stop with the performance theater. These guys have been in there for 35 years. They've done all the work and more than anybody could ask for them. Enough. Let them out. In fact, to accuse George Gascon of politics and then do this today is the height of hypocrisy.
Mark Geragos, I can't thank you enough. I know this was a busy day for you, and we caught you very last minute, and you agreed to do this for us, so I do really appreciate it. I wanted to hear right away what your reaction was to this very surprising news conference today by Nathan Hawkman. I think he's going to join us on Monday, so I'll ask him a few questions too. Thank you for this.
Yeah, and it's my Friday night date with Ashleigh. Thank you.
Aw, so fun. Hey, have a great weekend. I'm sure you have way more interesting people you're going to spend it with than me. Thanks, Geragos.
Bye, Ashleigh.
See you soon. Okay, I'm going to stay close to Geragos on this because obviously we are marching right towards that date in March, and that's critical. So, all right. In New York City, my friends, there are lines for everything. Coffee, cabs, clubs, theaters, restaurants. You just stand in line. But even in New York City, you don't see this kind of line. At the courthouse, 6 hours before a pretrial hearing, you don't even see this at a real trial. Not usually, but this happened today. And yep, you guessed it. The name on the docket was Luigi Mangione, who was back before a New York judge this afternoon. But the real drama, my friends, came from his lawyer. Because that lawyer is now taking on the mayor of New York City. And hoo-wee, was it hot. I'm going to show all of it to you next.
It's because it's a buffet of all-you-can-eat butterfly shrimp and sirloin steak.
Yeah, that's the reason.
I don't get it.
Do you have any idea how much this would cost at other restaurants?
Not really. I'm only 6.
A lot, honey. A lot, kiddo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can your pad flex with you without shifting? Always FlexFoam can. It's the only pad made with a flexible foam core with wings that fit securely for up to 0 bunching and 0 leaks. Can your pad do that? See what foam can do for you.
It is usually a treat for a criminal defendant to get a field trip out of the lockup, even if it's just to go to the courthouse for a hearing, right? You're just out from behind bars. But very few defendants encounter adoring fans waiting in line for hours on end, just to catch a glimpse and scream messages of love and support, messages screamed loud enough that could even be heard inside the courtroom.
Free Luigi! Free Luigi! Free Luigi! Free Luigi! Free Luigi!
Luigi is, of course, this Luigi Mangione, not the one with the green hat. He's an accused killer of the United Healthcare CEO, and he was back in a New York courtroom today for the very first time since his arraignment in December. And not all of his fans were outside. A NewsNation producer actually saw 30 young women lined up to get inside at 8 o'clock this morning. This was for a hearing that started at 2:15 this afternoon, so that's a day. Mangione came in wearing the green sweater, the white-collared shirt, tan pants, and then accent with the bulletproof vest. He was also shackled, and the judge refused a defense request to unshackle him. But when they got down to business, the prosecutors listed out everything they say they have turned over to Luigi's lawyers, including body cam footage, surveillance videos, forensic reports, and phone records. But then Luigi's lawyer got mad and accused the police in Pennsylvania of violating Luigi's rights when they arrested him and they seized all his belongings. I usually see you have your belongings seized when you're arrested, but okay. The lawyer got a little madder, too, said she's going to push to have all that evidence tossed out. And then outside court, a few minutes later, the cork blew. And she blasted New York's mayor, Eric Adams, and the NYPD brass for discussing alleged evidence on TV.
What I did not understand was how shocking it was that this week on HBO, in a documentary, I see the chief of detectives and the New York City mayor, full hair and makeup done, sitting down and giving an interview for television and talking about the evidence in Luigi's case, talking about police paperwork that we don't have, talking about forensics that we have not yet received. I guess we have now today, but I didn't when I was sitting there learning about the case, hearing an actor play Luigi reading from a journal that they say is Luigi's, and we have yet to receive it from the prosecution.
That was Karen Agnifilo. She is one of the lawyers, obviously, for Luigi. Fired up. I want to run all of this by another really good lawyer, one of the sharpest legal minds in the game. It's Joe Tacopina. He's a criminal defense attorney. He's a former prosecutor. He is also right fresh off of a very big win in the ASAP Rocky assault case. I guess we now call you ASAP Joe, but welcome to the program, Joey Tack. It's nice to see you again, ASAP Joe.
Hey, Ashley, how you doing? Sorry for the fancy attire. I've spent 5 weeks in a suit every day, so I'm just done with suits for a few weeks.
And I'm sure I heard somebody say that you were off to the gym as well. Listen, you can show up any way you like. Joey, you and I go back, 30 years or 25 years or something like that. I feel like I'd be steaming too. If I were a defense lawyer and I was watching HBO and I saw a bunch of evidence being presented by cops and a mayor that I hadn't received in discovery yet, I'd be mad. But is there anything really wrong with that?
Well, it gives a perception of a sort of lack of sort of priority. It gives a perception of lack of fairness. I mean, you're basically showing evidence that hasn't even been deemed to be admissible yet to potential jurors who, we don't know if that's coming in or not coming in. That shouldn't be done. Look, that office did it. In my case, when I had the so-called rape cops case, which they were acquitted of being rape cops, even though they were called rape cops for 2 years, that case, the same thing happened. The Sex Crimes Bureau did a whole documentary for HBO, and they were discussing the evidence in the case. And it's first of all, we should have had all of that information. We should have had the statements that were made because they were discoverable. They were statements made by witnesses in the case. We didn't find out about it until after the trial. Fortunately, we won, and nothing really came of it. But it's just not a good look. And really, honest to God, with all the issues you have going on with this case already, to go on TV and give fodder for the defense, to make some noise, it's really not a smart move. I mean, Eric Adams doesn't seem like he can do anything right now. He's a hot mess. Why he would do that, why the PD would participate in that, I don't know.
I also wonder if they're looking at this virtual love fest that's been going on, not just outside the courtroom and then inside the courtroom with all the Luigi, ladies. I don't know what to call them. They're Luigi lady fans, but also online. Like, it's wild out there, Joe, online, the supporters that this accused murderer, accused executioner, has, which brings me to my next question. Is it possible for Luigi Mangione really to get a fair jury and a fair trial?
I think the question should be inverted. Is it possible for the district attorney's office, the people in the state of New York, to get a fair trial? I mean, look at these morons. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to call them. But anyone who's out there with a Free Luigi sign, wearing those stupid, ridiculous hats, thinking that it's really a funny thing that a guy who's accused of cowardly assassination of a father of two on the eve of Christmas, it should be freed because they have a problem with the healthcare industry. Like, he's some righteous killer because they're going against a behemoth. corporate America. Well, if that's the case, we should start killing these chairman of BP, the oil company where there's all those problems with the leaking of oil into the sea and all these other industries we don't like. I mean, we might as well hit every, that's United Healthcare. What about Oxford? What about all these other healthcare CEOs? Do they get murdered? I mean, murdered. I mean, look at this. This is disgusting. What a coward. And then he runs away. It's just,
a lot of people, I'll tell you, Joe, a lot of people have said, were he not so handsome, this would not be raging in the press the way it is. It just wouldn't be the same kind of story.
I really hope that's not
There's
the
the victim of the case, right?
Yeah, I really hope that's not the case
there.
because we look so stupid as a society if that's the case. What I'm hearing,
I'm with you.
which really drives me crazy, is Ivy League schools and students at Ivy League schools are really supporting his release, which makes me think we are backwards.
Well, we got a bit of a history there in the last year, that's for sure. Hey, Joey Tech, come back again. Love seeing you, and I love that you have the new moniker, ASAP Joe. I think ASAP Rocky even said the next baby will be ASAP Joe. So stay in touch, will you?
Okay, thanks, Ash.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Okay, 1 week ago, I was sitting here for an entire Friday night for a special on Jack the Ripper, the mystery. We began with a very compelling DNA case that Jack was an immigrant barber connected to a victim with a bloody shawl. But there is a rogues gallery of other suspects, some more likely than others. And behind each suspect is a crime buff, a historian, or an actual investigator who is convinced that they have solved the most infamous serial killings in history. But only one suspect has been outed by the immensely popular true crime author, Patricia Cornwell. Cornwell says the Ripper was no barber. He was a man of culture, and you might even know his work. She is live with me next to lay out the case as only Patricia Cornwell can, and I can't wait.
Realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house that you didn't even know existed.
Unfortunately, it's on you to protect yourself. You might already be a victim. Check your title status now at HomeTitleLock.com.
More than 135 years after Jack the Ripper terrorized London's East End, killing at least 5 women and sending thousands of people into a frenzy, the most infamous murder spree ever is getting almost as much attention as it did back then. And that's because a British historian recently claimed that he's got proof that Jack the Ripper was a young Polish barber named Aaron Kosminski. And it all sounds plausible enough, if not ironclad. But the Kosminski theory is far from the only one out there. My next guest has her own ideas on the Whitechapel murderer. And murder is right up her alley. Patricia Cornwell is one of the best-known, most successful true crime authors of all time, with more than 120 million copies in print. Whew. In her book, Ripper, The Secret Life of Walter Sickert, she makes the case that Jack was actually a German-born painter who's fairly well-known himself. To quote Chapel Roan, Walter Sickert would be your favorite Victorian painter's favorite Victorian painter. Sickert was also what's known as a ripperologist before we ever even had a ripperologist term. His friends claimed that he would dress up like Jack. He also painted this portrait entitled Jack the Ripper's Bedroom, none of which proves anything in itself, but we're only getting started. Patricia Cornwell is live with me now. Welcome to the program. This is awesome. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Ashleigh, and I'm glad to be here. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, even though it's a very grim subject, and people tend to forget that these were unbelievably savage crimes. They were the violence in some of them is unlike anything I've ever seen. Mary Kelly was flayed to the bone. I mean, this is not some cute little Ripper walk. This was a terrible serial killer, and the evidence that I've come upon from doing 20 years of this now indicate that there were more than just those 5 women. There were other victims, and also I believe that Jack the Ripper killed some children, and he even bragged about it in his letters. But I want to start by saying this was never my idea. I was invited to Scotland Yard in 2001, and I met with this very senior, esteemed investigator named John Grieve. And he starts talking to me about Jack the Ripper, and I'm thinking, why is he doing this? I'm interested in modern crimes. And then he wanted me to go on a tour the next day through Whitechapel. Long story short, he was basically recruiting me to start looking into this. And then he said, if you're going to do it, he says, you need to look into, quote, a chap named Walter Sickert, who was a painter. His name has come up before, and he said, I'm very suspicious of this particular person. And I said, why can't you do that? And he said, well, we can't investigate a crime when there's no one left to arrest after this many years. But I remain convinced that Walter Sickert, based on paper analysis in the letters, based on historical evidence, based on so many things, I believe he was Jack the Ripper. I know for sure he wrote some of the confessional violent letters that the police received that were signed, catch me if you can, Jack the Ripper, and that sort of thing.
It's super fascinating, and you're absolutely right. There are descendants of the great grand category who are still emotional about their descendants dying in that way. These are victims' descendants, and so you're absolutely right. It's a case that deserves to be solved, even if Scotland Yard doesn't have the mechanism to do it. But before I go to a little bit more on Sickert, what do you think about Edward Russell's, positioning that DNA solved the case and that it was Aaron Kosminski? I guess that says a lot.
No, and look, listen, I don't believe it was Aaron Kosminski, and I absolutely do not trust this new DNA analysis, and I'm not the only one. I mean, I'm not a DNA scientist, but people who are legendary in the field, like Turi King and Adam Rutherford. Adam Rutherford says, this is terrible science. He calls it basically rubbish. And Turi King has been very vocal about the same sort of thing, that there are huge questions. And I will also point out one thing that's really important. We don't know for sure that the provenance of that so-called, shawl really did belong to Catherine Eddowes. If you look at the original police sketch, a crime scene sketch that was done at the time when her body was on the pavement in Mitre Square in the city of London, there is no garment like that around her. And if you read the original police report, there is no mention of something like that. But even if there had been, the contamination of this thing is horrific because it's been handled by so many people over the years. So I do not trust. Yeah. I call it fake news.
I have 10 seconds left, but I'd be remiss if I didn't just list out a couple things that point to Walter Sickert, sorry. He had a hatred of women. He had an obsession with killers, especially Jack the Ripper. He painted 4 paintings of another murder, the Camden Town murder. The letters to Scotland Yard, written on what looked like his stationery with the same watermark, and DNA from a stamp also is said to have a link to Sickert. With 5 seconds left, I have to ask you, and I'm so out of time, Patricia, but will we ever definitively know, yes or no?
I don't think we're ever going to get that from DNA, even if we got lucky with finding some sequences in common, and we did with the analysis that we did. Definitively, there's just not enough evidence left. It's too late for that, but there is such a thing as substantial and composites, and I think it points at Sickert, and I don't think that's going to change.
Please come back again. I adore you, and you are awesome at what you do.
I adore you, and I'll come back anytime.
Yay, that's awesome. Patricia Cornwell, thank you so much, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Patricia's book is called Ripper, The Secret Life of Walter Sickert. Coming up next, a super lousy and devastating week for Bryan Kohberger's team. On the heels of no fewer than 4 catastrophic rulings against them, there is yet another piece of bad news being filed with the court, and Bryan Kohberger's not going to like it. Tell you about it next.
With horses.
Let's take a look at those scenarios.
JP Morgan Wealth Management has advisors in Chase branches and tools like Wealth Plan to help keep you on track. When you're planning for it all, the answer is JP Morgan Wealth Management.
Say what you will about Bryan Kohberger's defense team. They are earning their taxpayer-funded salaries. They have attacked the prosecution's quadruple murder case at every possible turn, starting with the grand jury. They argue that that panel was biased and misinstructed, and both of those arguments failed. Here's the problem, big one. The defense lawyers apparently also failed to keep the state informed about their communications with the judge, and that is a major no-no. So now, more than a year later, prosecutors are demanding and being granted audio recordings from two separate so-called proceedings. We still don't know exactly how or why or what the state was shut out of, but it is not a good look for Team Kohberger, especially on the very week that they lost four separate Hail Mary bids to throw out the most damning evidence in the case. And speaking of bad news for Brian, Idaho is pushing forward to make the firing squad the method of choice for executions. And as you know, he is facing the death penalty if convicted. But while he sweats that out, Brad Sigmund is welcoming it. Sigmund is on death row in South Carolina, where the prisoner gets to choose between firing squad, lethal injection, or electric chair. The lawyer says that he sees the firing squad as the, quote, least monstrous option. So this is going to be the first use of a firing squad in the United States since 2010, and only the fourth time since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. Brad Sigmund was convicted in 2001 of murdering his ex-girlfriend's parents with a baseball bat. He's 67 now. He's set to die on March the 7th. And on the topic of staring down a firing squad with rifles, an armored guard did just that when three masked men pointed their assault rifles at him while grabbing the cash that he was loading into an ATM.
Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it.
Dang. Full video next. Armored car heists are pretty rare these days, and rarer still is when the heist is caught on video from the point of view of the guard being robbed, but it happened on Valentine's Day in Memphis. Three gunmen jacked a guard trying to load up an ATM with cash. The cops were nice enough to freeze the video in a few places so that we could get a good look at the suspects. Take a peek.
Don't do it. 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 Don't do it.
Man, you believe these guys? Police recovered the getaway car, but they say those robbers, they are still on the loose, and apparently they still have the money. Does it for us tonight. Watch your six, everybody. Be safe out there. Cuomo's next.
My brothers and sisters, I'm Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. All that Doge drama has taken center stage from what was supposed to be the real cleanup effort, right? Removing dangerous criminals who are here illegally. Remember that? Trump pledged mass deportations on his first day in office. And they started off with a lot of talk. They got a strong guy in Hawkman in there, and the mandate was clear. Yesterday marked 1 month. So, what do we know? I think it's fair to say we're not seeing the kinds of productivity promised.